You smell it before you see it. A faint trace of smoke drifting through the trees. Something deep inside your chest tightens. Your nostrils flare. Your eyes scan the horizon without you even deciding to do that. And somewhere, buried beneath every layer of civilization you were born into, a very old part of your brain whispers, run. That instinct did not come from nowhere. It came from hundreds of thousands of years of practice. Your ancestors stood exactly where you are standing right now, not metaphorically, but literally, on open ground, watching fires move toward them faster than they could think. And they survived. Not all of them, not always, but enough. Enough to pass something down to you, something you still carry in your body today. The real story of how ancient humans survived wildfire is not a story about luck. It is not a story about primitive people running in panic. It is a story about the most sophisticated survival system ever assembled, a system built by fire, refined by fire, and passed forward through fire. And the strangest part? Fire did not just threaten your ancestors. In ways that took scientists decades to fully understand, fire may have been the single most important force that made you human. Start with the obvious question. What actually happens when a wildfire begins? In a dry savanna or open woodland, the kind of landscape your ancestors called home for most of human prehistory, fire moves with terrifying speed. Grass fires can travel at up to 22 kilometers per hour under the right wind conditions. The smoke arrives first, then the heat, then the sound, a low roaring crackle that grows until it fills the air completely. Animals scatter. Birds explode from trees. Insects swarm upward in black clouds. And in the middle of all of this, a group of early humans has maybe 3 to 4 minutes to make a decision. What did they do? The answer, according to paleoanthropologist Andrew Sorensen and his colleagues studying early hominin behavior in African fire-prone landscapes, is that they did not simply flee. They read. They read the fire the way a sailor reads the sea, tracking wind direction, monitoring smoke color, watching how animals moved and where they moved to. Early humans were not passive victims of wildfire. They were active interpreters of it. Your brain actually still does this. When you see smoke, your threat detection circuitry, centered in the amygdala, activates within milliseconds. You do not decide to be afraid. You already are before the conscious part of your brain even registers what it has seen. That speed is not a flaw. It is a feature installed by millions of years of exactly this kind of pressure. But reading fire was only the first layer. The second layer was knowing the land. One of the most underestimated survival advantages ancient humans had was intimate, multi-generational knowledge of their territory. Researcher David Carrier, studying early human endurance physiology, noted that Homo sapiens and their immediate predecessors were among the most territorially knowledgeable animals in their ecosystems. They knew where the rivers were. They knew which rocky outcroppings offered fire shelter. They knew which hillsides the fire would climb and which valleys it would bypass. This knowledge was not written down. It lived in memory, in story, in the warnings that older group members had passed to younger ones across generations. When a wildfire broke out, the knowledge of where to run was not invented in the moment. It had been rehearsed, not formally, not deliberately, but through years of listening to elders describe the time the fire came from the east, or the way the valley near the dry riverbed always trapped smoke, or how you could tell wind shift before the fire even changed direction. That is something worth sitting with. The survival information passed around a fire, around a campfire, at night, in the form of story, may have literally saved lives when the next wildfire came. The act of storytelling was not entertainment, it was survival infrastructure. Now consider the body itself. Your ancestors were not faster than fire. No human is. But they had something most animals do not: the ability to sustain effort over long distance. Evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has spent years documenting the physical architecture of the human body as a long-distance running machine. The neutral ligament that stabilizes your head while you run. The Achilles tendon that stores and releases energy with each stride. The sweat glands, more than any other primate, that allowed early humans to cool their bodies while running in heat that would have collapsed a chasing predator. In a wildfire scenario, this matters enormously. Most large animals, lions, wildebeest, zebra, sprint from fire in short explosive bursts. They tire quickly. Humans could run at a sustainable pace, at speed, through heat, for distances that no other land animal could match. Not faster than the fire, but fast enough, long enough, to find the edge of it. And when they could not outrun it, they went up. Rocky terrain, cliff faces, hillsides with sparse vegetation. These were natural fire breaks that early humans learned to use. Fire needs fuel. Where there is no fuel, there is no fire. Bare rock offers no fuel. A river offers no fuel. Your ancestors knew this. Archaeological evidence from sites in southern Africa and the Middle East shows early human habitation consistently clustered near rocky escarpments, cave mouths, and riverine corridors, not only because these offered shelter from predators, but because they offered shelter from fire. Archaeologist Francesco De Rico and his team, excavating sites like Pinnacle Point in South Africa, found evidence of repeated habitation in cave systems overlooking fire-prone coastal shrubland. These were not accidental choices. The positioning was strategic. The cave mouth faces away from the prevailing fire season winds. The rock platform outside the entrance creates a natural fire break. These are not coincidences. They are decisions, accumulated, passed down, life or death decisions made by people who understood fire in ways most modern humans have completely forgotten. But here is the counterintuitive part, the part that changes everything. Your ancestors were not only trying to escape wildfire, they were trying to get close to it. This is the twist that took researchers a long time to fully accept. Early humans, and possibly even earlier hominins like Homo erectus, were attracted to wildfire, not only repelled by it. Not because they were reckless, because wildfire meant food. Think about what a wildfire leaves behind: scorched earth, dead animals, and something ancient humans understood with extraordinary precision: cooked food. Wildfires naturally cook prey animals caught in the burn. Large herbivores that cannot outrun a fast-moving grass fire are killed and partially roasted in place. For an early human group arriving after the fire front passed, this was not a disaster scene. It was a feast. Researcher Richard Wrangham at Harvard, whose work on the cooking hypothesis changed how we think about human evolution, has argued that early exposure to naturally cooked food from wildfires may have been a critical early step in hominins developing a preference for, and eventually a dependence on, cooked calories. Cooked food is easier to chew. It yields more calories per gram. It reduces the bacterial load of raw meat, and it can be eaten faster, freeing time for other activities. The human gut, shorter and less fibrous than those of other great apes, is not designed for raw food. It is designed for food that has already been partially broken down by heat. That design did not appear overnight. It appeared because for a very long time, fire-cooked food was available, and the hominins who could access it survived better. This creates a staggering loop. Fire threatened your ancestors, but it also fed them. It fed them so consistently and so well that over hundreds of thousands of years, the human body literally changed to depend on what fire produced. Your digestive system is, in a very real sense, a fire adaptation. And it goes further. Wildfire clears dense vegetation. It opens sight lines. It creates open savanna from closed woodland. And open savanna, with long sight lines in every direction, easy movement across terrain, and grassland that supports large herds of prey animals, was exactly the kind of landscape that early Homo sapiens was physically and cognitively built for. We are, as anthropologist Robin Dunbar has observed, a grassland species. We did not simply inhabit the savanna. We were shaped by it, and fire, regularly burning back the trees, kept the savanna open. Your ancestors did not just survive wildfire. At some point, they started setting it. This is perhaps the most radical cognitive leap in human prehistory. At some point, researchers debate exactly when, with estimates ranging from 400,000 to over 1,000,000 years ago, hominins began to deliberately use fire. Not just exploit naturally occurring fire, create it, control it, aim it. The use of controlled fire setting as a landscape management tool is documented in Australian Aboriginal culture going back at least 50,000 years, and possibly far longer. The practice, sometimes called cultural burning or fire stick farming, involved deliberately burning sections of land to encourage new growth, drive game animals, clear travel paths, and reduce the fuel load that would otherwise accumulate and produce catastrophic, uncontrolled wildfires. They were not fighting fire. They were managing fire, using small, controlled burns to prevent the enormous, terrifying ones. This is knowledge that did not appear suddenly. It was built gradually, observation by observation, generation by generation. Someone noticed that the area burned last dry season had lush new grass this season and more animals grazing on it. Someone noticed that fire moved differently when the wind came from the north versus the south. Someone noticed that burning a narrow strip ahead of an oncoming fire could starve the larger fire of its fuel. These are not simple observations. They require memory across seasons. They require the ability to hold a mental model of cause and effect across time. They require language to transmit. And they require a social group willing to act on collective knowledge rather than individual panic. Surviving wildfire, in other words, required everything that makes you human. It required long-distance movement capacity. It required territorial knowledge accumulated across generations. It required the ability to read environmental signals and communicate threat information rapidly to a group. It required the cognitive flexibility to reframe fire from pure threat to potential resource. And eventually, it required the audacity to pick up fire, carry it, feed it, and point it in a direction of your choosing. There is a detail worth pausing on. The carrying of fire. Fire does not travel easily. It goes out. It needs fuel, oxygen, the right conditions. For early humans to move fire from a natural source, a lightning strike, a lava flow, a dying wildfire's edge, to a campsite required sustained, attentive effort. Someone in the group had to be responsible for the fire, had to feed it during movement, had to shield it from wind and rain, had to restart it from embers if it died down. Archaeologist Dennis Sandgath, reviewing evidence from Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens sites in Europe, found patterns suggesting that in some periods, early humans carried and maintained fire continuously for weeks or months at a time. This is not casual behavior. This is commitment. This is what researchers call a behavioral dependency. Fire was no longer something that happened to these people. It was something they were responsible for, something they kept alive. Think about that word, kept alive. As though fire were a member of the group. In many ancient traditions, it was treated exactly that way. The fire was not a tool. It was a presence, something that required tending, feeding, protection from the elements, something that provided warmth, light, cooked food, and a center for the group to gather around at night. The psychological relationship between early humans and fire was not purely instrumental. It was, in the fullest sense, relational. And here is where the story of surviving wildfire becomes something more than a survival story. When your ancestors sat around a fire at night after having fled a wildfire, or after having eaten animals cooked by one, or after having deliberately set one to clear the land ahead, they told stories. They described what had happened, what they had seen, what had worked and what had not, who had run which direction, where the fire had moved and why, how close it had come. In doing so, they were not just processing trauma. They were uploading information into the group's collective memory. They were turning individual survival experience into shared survival knowledge. They were, in a very real sense, performing an act that every school, every library, every recorded history has been performing ever since. They were passing it forward. The reason you know to fear fire before you consciously see it is because someone, hundreds of thousands of years ago, survived long enough to tell someone else what fire felt like before you saw it. And that someone told someone else. And eventually, the story was not even told in words anymore. It was written into the wiring of your nervous system itself. You still carry the memory of wildfire, not as a thought, as a reflex, as a tightening in the chest when you smell smoke that you cannot explain and cannot stop, as the way your eyes move to the horizon before you decide to look. Your ancestors survived the wildfire. And in surviving it, they became something the fire did not expect. They became the species that learned to carry fire with them, to use it, to think with it, to build the entire modern world, every city, every engine, every light bulb, from the knowledge of how to keep a flame burning through the night. The next time you smell smoke on the wind and your chest tightens before your mind catches up, that is not fear. That is memory. Ancient memory. The oldest kind there is. And it kept someone alive long enough for you to be here, reading this, wondering about a fire that burned before anyone was keeping track.